Alright, we're going to be going over the Unit 3 review sheet. The first three problems, the directions are name the following using the degree and the number of terms. Well, before we do that, let's go back and talk about what that means. If you're trying to name a polynomial by its degree, you're going to look at the highest exponent. Okay, the degree is referring to the highest exponent. So if the highest exponent is 0, that's known as a constant. Now, the only time you're going to have an exponent of 0 is when there's no variable at all. Okay, because like look at number 3. This x, I don't see an exponent, but since there's an x, doesn't that mean that it's raised to the first power? But over here, there's no variable, so that must mean it's raised to the 0 power. Now, you could also have it raised to the first power, which is called linear. You could raise it to the second power, which is quadratic. The third power is cubic. The fourth power is quartic. And the fifth power is quintic. Now, if your highest exponent is greater than 5, like 6, 7, 8, or up, you'll just say degree 6 or degree 7. You don't have to give it a special name. Now, you're also going to name these by the number of terms that they have. So obviously, we can't start this list with 0, because if you have 0 terms, you don't have a problem, right? So they'll start out with 1 term, 2 terms, or 3 terms. If it's 1 term, what is that called? A monomial. If it's 2 terms, what is it called? A binomial. And if it's 3 terms, it's called a trinomial. Now, if you have more than 3 terms, 4 and up would just be called a polynomial with however many terms it has. You would just fill in the blank. If it's 4, you put 4. If it's 5 terms, you put 5. We only have special names for 1 term, 2 terms, and 3 terms. Okay, so now using that information that you'll just have to have memorized, what is the name of number 1? Right, cubic, because your largest exponent is a 3, so that's degree 3, which is cubic. Trinomial, because it has 1, 2, 3 terms. Okay, what about number 2? Constant, because since there's no variable, there's no exponent, so it would be degree 0. Monomial, because it has 1 term. And then number 3? Linear, because the highest exponent is a 1. Binomial, because it has 2 terms. Now, you have to have all of this memorized, though, because tomorrow's questions might not be these 3 things. There might be a quartic binomial on there, or a quartic polynomial with 5 terms. So you have to have all that memorized. Yes, Courtney? Yes, because if it has a 2, even though if it's negative 4x squared minus 6, it's a 2, so it would not make a straight line when you graph it. It would make a parabola. Okay? So just go by what number's there. Okay, number 4. They want you to expand x minus 4 cubed. Well, what does x minus 4 cubed literally mean? Right, x minus 4 times x minus 4 times x minus 4. Well, if we wrote out x minus 4 times x minus 4 times x minus 4, aren't you going to have to FOIL the first 2, get a trinomial, and then distribute that trinomial times the leftover binomial? And that's a lot of work, right? I mean, you could do that, I think, but that's a lot of work. What have we learned to do instead? Pascal's triangle. Okay, so close your eyes real quick. Everybody close your eyes. Josh, I need to erase this from last period so we can practice filling it in. Okay, we need to practice filling this in. What goes up top?
1.
And then what do you know?
1.
Ones go all the way down each side. Okay, and I'm just going to fill in what I I can see. Now, to find this number, you look above it and add. 1 and 1 is 2. To find this one, 1 and 2 is 3. So, right, you can also see another pattern, 1, 2, 3, 4, so this would be 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Same thing going this way. That could help you fill it in a little faster if you remember that. And then 10, 10, and so on. We're not going to fill in the whole thing. Now, tomorrow, you're not going to be given a blank one on your test. You're just going to have to make your own somewhere on your scratch paper, on the grade chem, Scantron, or wherever you can find room. Now, I will project a blank one of these on the board. That way you can kind of look at it, and that way when you're making your own, you kind of can see how to make it, but you'll have to make your own, and you'll have to fill it in. Okay, so then when we go to use that, this one is to the third power. What do you know about the third power? How many terms is it going to have? 4. You always have one more term than the exponent is. Well, since it's 4 terms, when you go to your triangle, this is the row with 4 numbers, and it's the row that has a 3, and since it's cubed, that's what we're going to use. 1, 3, 3, 1. Okay, what else goes with each term? Right, we bring down the x on each one of them, and you bring down that 4, but it's negative, so make sure you put negative 4 inside the parentheses. Okay, now, what about the exponents? How do those work? Right, the x gets to start out cubed because it was first, and then the negative 4 does the opposite. It increases. And the reason we do that is so that when you look at one particular term, the exponents add up to 3. 2 plus 1 is 3, 1 plus 2 is 3, and so on. Okay, now we just have to start simplifying. Like we have a 1 times an x cubed times a what? 1. Anything raised to the 0 power is 1. So what is 1 times x cubed times 1? X cubed. And so now we're done with term 1. Term 2, we have a 3 times an x squared times negative 4. Because negative 4 to the first power is negative 4. When you multiply that, what do you get? Right. Okay, the third one, we have a 3 times an x times positive 16. And remember, anytime a negative number is raised to an even exponent, it's going to make it a positive number because a negative times a negative is a positive. What is 3 times x times 16? Positive 48x. And then for the last one, we have a 1 times negative 64, which is negative 64. Also, keep in mind when you're looking at your choices and trying to mark out ones that you know won't work, anytime you're dealing with a binomial that's subtraction, what happens with your signs? They alternate. Positive, negative, positive, negative. Anytime you're working with addition, what are all your signs? All positive. Will you ever have a case where they're all negative? No. Okay, so now let's try number 5. Since it's to the 4th power, how many terms are we going to have? 5. So when you look to the triangle, you can see that that needs to be 1, 4, 6, 4, 1. Okay, what else do we put with each term? Right, the first term goes on each one of them. And since it's first, it gets to start out to the 4th power and then decreases. Okay, and then what's our second term? 3y, and since there's a number in that, you put it in parentheses. Oh, wait, I messed up. That one starts out to the 0th power and then goes up. Okay? Now we're ready to start simplifying. I have a 1 times x to the 4th times 1. All of that's in parentheses, so therefore all of it's raised to the 0 power, making it 1. What is 1 times x 4th times 1? X to the 4th. Okay, the next one, we have a 4 times times a 3y. Well, just break it into two parts. What's 4 times 3? Positive 12. What's x cubed times y? X cubed y. Because you can't actually multiply them. They're two different variables. You just mash them together. Okay, for the next one, I have a 6 times an x squared times 9y squared. You square the 3, which is 9, and the y, which is y squared. Okay, now what do you get when you multiply all that together? Right. Okay, then for the next one, we have a 4 times x times, right, 3 cubed is 27, y cubed is y cubed, and when you multiply all that up, you get a, right? And then for the last one, you have a 1 times 1 times 81y to the 4th. Because 3 to the 4th is 81, y to the 4th is y to the 4th, and that makes a... Okay, also look in your answer. This term has a 4. This term, that's cubed, and that's to the first, adds up to 4. Those add up to 4. These add up to 4, and that's 4. Okay, your answer will also look like that. Okay, number 6. Can I erase everything above it?
Yeah.
Okay, number 6. 8x cubed plus 24x squared plus 24x plus 8 is the expanded form of which of the following? Okay, well, this was to the 4th power. These two are to the 3rd power. How can that help you? Right. This answer has 4 terms, so that means it was cubed. So A's out. Because when something's raised to the 4th power, it would produce 5 terms. Now, once you've narrowed it down to B and C, what would you do? Right? A lot of people, though, wouldn't know that, and you would work each one of them out, right? But look at what you have to do. The last number is 8. Is 1 cubed going to give you an 8? Is 2 cubed going to give you an 8? Yes. So now that I've shown you that, I want you to try number 7, but there's a typo on number 7. This should be a 16 at the beginning instead of a 2. So I'm going to give you 30 seconds to try number 7. Okay? Number 7, what'd y'all get? B is correct. You knew it couldn't have been this one that's raised to the 3rd power because we have 5 terms in our answer. So it had to be raised to the 4th power. But to get 1 at the end, 1 to the 4th is 1. 2 to the 4th is what? 16. So it had to be B. Does that make sense? Okay, now flip to the next page, number 8. Alright, simplify 6i divided by negative 8 minus 6i. Okay, well what's the problem?
There's an I.
There's an I in the denominator. How do you get the I out of the denominator?
Gotta multiply with a conjugate.
Okay, what is the conjugate?
10 minus.
Right, when you're doing the conjugate, all you change is the complex part, not the real part. Now when you go to multiply that, what method do you use in the numerator? Distribute. 6i times negative 8 is negative 48i, and 6i times 6i is, right. Okay, now let's go and do the bottom. What method do you have to use to multiply the bottom? FOIL. Okay, what are the first terms? Right, they're negative 8, which multiplies to a positive 64. What are the outer terms? Right, negative 48i, because negative 8 times 6i is negative 48i. What are the inner terms? Positive 48i, because those make a positive 48i. And what are the last terms? Right, and like we've talked about before, we really could skip the outer and the inner because they always cancel each other out on the denominator. Okay, now, what else can be simplified? What is 36i squared? Right. And what is a negative 36i squared? A positive 36. So the denominator becomes what? 100. And I'm going to go and break it apart just to save time. What does the numerator become? Right, you have to reverse the order so that the real number's first and the complex number's second. Now, is this one finished? We can reduce. What is negative 36 divided by 100? Okay, and then what's negative 48 over 100? Right, so that's the final answer. Okay, number 9, same kind of problem. So how do we start? Okay, then what do I have to do? Which gives me, right? And then that one, nothing can be combined. There's no I squared to change to negative 1, and it's in standard form. What about the bottom? FOIL it, but like we said earlier, don't we already know the outer and the inner terms will cancel out, so we can just go from the first to the last? What do you get when you multiply the first terms? 100. What do you get when you multiply the last terms? Negative I squared. Well, what is a negative I squared? A positive 1, because it's a negative, negative 1, and so that makes 101 on the bottom. So let me go ahead and break it apart. So we have a 101 for our denominator, and then a 90 minus 9i. Can either fraction be reduced? No, so that's the final answer. Okay, number 10. What is the conjugate of 8 plus 4i? 8 minus 4i. All you change is the complex part. What about the conjugate of 8 minus 3i? Right. Okay, number 12. What is number 12 wanting you to do?
Subtract.
Subtract. So what's the very first step you have to do?
Distribute that.
Right. The subtraction sign doesn't just belong to the 7. It belongs to everything in parentheses, so it belongs to both. So this is not affected, but this becomes minus 7 minus 4i. Now what can we do?
Cancel out 7.
Right. We have a 7 minus 7, which is 0. And then we're left with a negative 4i minus 4i, which is
8i.
negative 8i. Okay, number 13, what do they want you to do? Add. So do we need to distribute anything? No, we're just ready to combine like terms. We have a 2 and a 4 that makes 6. And then we have a 3i and a negative 2i, which is
1i.
positive 1i, but you don't have to write the 1. 6 plus I would be the final answer. Okay, number 14, what are they wanting you to do? FOIL this time, because this time the binomials are touching, which means they want you to multiply. So when we FOIL, you do 4 times 5 and get 20. 4 times 3i. Negative 2i times 5 is, and negative 2i times 3i is negative 6i squared. Then what can we do? Right? Okay. And get a positive 2i. Okay, number 15. Simplify negative 6i times 9i. What is negative 6 times 9?
50.
And then they each have an I, so I squared. What is negative 54i squared?
54.
Positive 54. Does everybody know why? I squared equals negative 1. So a negative 1 times a negative 54 is positive 54. Okay, number 16. Isn't the square root of negative 25 like a square root of 25 times the square root of negative 1? What is the square root of 25? What's the square root of negative 1? I. Number 17. Isn't the square root of negative 80 like the square root of 80 times the square root of negative 1? Well, what's the square root of 80?
4 square root 5.
4 square root 5. What's the square root put it?
4i.
Outside beside the 4. Okay, go ahead and turn to the next page. Write the okay, a little early. I just can't stop. We don't have time to wait. Okay, here we go. Write the following in standard form. The square root of -4 is what? 2i. The square root of 4 is 2, but since it was negative, that produces the I. Plus 10. Now, they ask us to write it in standard form. Is that in standard form?
No.
No. What would it look like in standard form?
10 plus 2i.
Okay, number 19, write the following in standard form. What's the square root of -100? 10i, and then minus 99, but what would that look like once you've written it in standard form? Okay, number 20, simplify I cubed. Well, what is I cubed if you break it down? I times I times I. Well, what is I times I? I squared, which we know is a -1. So these two i's become a -1, and then you have that one left over. So that's the answer, but you would just see it as -I on the test. They wouldn't write the 1. Okay, what about I to the 8? How many i's is that? 8. Okay? So if you write out I times I times I times I times I times I times I, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, what do we know? Those make a -1, those make a -1, those two, and those two. So what's a -1 times a -1 times a -1 times a -1? Positive 1. Because the negative times the negative makes those positive, negative times the negative makes those positive. Okay, can I erase? Number 22, write the following in standard form and then name the polynomial based on its degree and number of terms. Okay, so when we write that in standard form, what do we have to do? Okay, let's talk about that. Dontavius said put the constant first, but when you put the constant first, that's only for what kind of problems? The ones with complex. This doesn't have any imaginary numbers, so that standard form is the opposite. You start it with the highest exponent, which is that -10x to the 5th. Then after that, we would write positive 3x to the 3rd, and then we would write and then, okay, so what do we name that? What degree is it? Right, it's a degree 5, so that's quintic, and then it has 5 terms, and so we don't have a special name, we just say polynomial with 5 terms. Okay, number 23 and 24 are the same type of question. They both are asking for the product. So what are you going to do on those? Multiply. What method? FOIL. So for right now, I'm going to skip them because if we don't get to that, I'm pretty sure you'll be okay with FOILing. Okay, but we'll come back to it if we have time. Let's look at 25. Simplify 4x to the 4th plus 10x to the 6th minus 8x cubed plus 5 minus 7x minus, that's a minus sign, it's just little, 4x cubed minus 10 plus 12x minus 3x to the 6th. What's the first thing we have to do for this one? Distribute that negative to everything after it. Okay, so it does not affect this one, but this one will become a minus 4x cubed plus 10. So basically all that happens is every sign changes to the opposite of what it was. So now I'm going to scratch out all of that because it has all become what I wrote below it. Now when I get ready to combine like terms, I'm going to want my answer in standard form, so shouldn't we just kind of do that as we go? So what does that mean? Right, so we should start with the ones with the highest exponent. So, like Justice said, 10x to the 6 would combine with what? So, how many x to the 6 do we have? 13. And then cross those out. That way you know you're done with them. Okay, what's your next largest exponent? 4. Is there anything to combine with it? No, so you just bring down the positive 4x to the 4th. Okay, what's the next largest? Right, the cube terms, and how many are there? Negative 12. And then your next ones are negative 7x. I think I crossed out something over here. Was it minus 12x right there? And that becomes a negative 19x. And then all you're left with is 5 plus 10, which is 15. So that would be a degree 6 polynomial with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 terms. All right, number 26. I'm going to make some scratch paper to work with. All right, the legs of a right triangle are 3x plus 2 and 6x minus 4. The perimeter of the right triangle is x squared plus 5x minus 1. So what is the length of the hypotenuse? Okay, well what I did was I drew a right triangle. Okay, a right triangle is just a triangle with a 90-degree angle. Now, which ones are the legs? The ones that form the right angle, correct? This one is the longest side and it's known as the hypotenuse. And we don't know the length of the hypotenuse. It's unknown. Does it matter which leg we label with which? No. So I'll just label this one 3x plus 2 and this one 6x minus 4. And they're wanting us to find what of this triangle?
The hypotenuse.
Well, right, but we want to find the perimeter, and the perimeter is x squared plus 5x minus 1. Like they already gave us the actual perimeter. How do you find perimeter of any figure? Just add it all up. So let's go ahead and add up the two that we know. What is 3x plus 6x? 9x. What's 2 plus negative 4? Negative 2. But then we have to then add that to the hypotenuse, which is unknown, and we know that the answer is this. Okay, well think about it. It has to have an x squared in the hypotenuse, because otherwise how are you going to get an x squared over here? This one didn't have it. Now, if you're trying to get to 5x, and right now you're at 9x, you can just minus 4x. And if you're trying to get from a negative 2 to a negative 1, you add 1. So B. Does that make sense?
Wait, you can already cancel out A.
Right, you could have canceled out A and B right away once you knew that you just needed an x squared. And that would have brought you to those two. And then you could have really stopped once you figured out that. Okay, number 27. If f of x equals 2x to the 4th minus 4x squared, what is f of I equivalent to? So what are they wanting you to do here? Well, see how it was x over here and they're saying find f of I? Didn't they just replace the x with an I? So shouldn't we take these x's and replace them with i's? Okay, but then we have to simplify that. I to the 4th is what? How many i's is that? 4. So it's I times I times I times I. So let's write that off to the side. Okay, well we know that I times I is I squared, which is a negative 1. And so this one also produces a negative 1. Negative 1 times negative 1 is positive 1. So really I to the 4th is just a positive 1. So 2 times 1 is 2. Now let's simplify this one, which is a little easier. I squared equals, and negative 4 times negative 1 is positive 4. So the final answer is 6. Okay, now let's go back up to those two we skipped. All right, number 23 and 24. All they're wanting you to do is find the product, which means multiply, and it's two binomials, so you just FOIL. 2x times 4x is would you multiply next? Which is, and then you would multiply, which is, and then you would multiply, which is that the final answer? Why not? And that makes, right? And then everything else, there's nothing to combine with it, so you just bring it down, and that's the final answer. Alright, now we're going to do the same thing to number 24. 3x times x is, 3x times 8 is, negative 5 times x is, and negative 5 times 8 is, okay? And then what do I do? Which is, and then minus 40 comes down, and that's a positive, and then 3x squared. And so that's your final answer. Okay, remember, this video will be posted on my blog. You can watch it from a cell phone, computer, even a TV if you have that capability. Okay, so if you're still confused, you need to go back and watch parts or all of it, whatever you need help on. The test is tomorrow.